actually. I'm pretty shocked about that. Okay. Chapter 6. Ah, hello. My gosh. We are reading chapters 6 through 8 of On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. Oh, hi. So, yeah, we're gonna get started in about 3 minutes. Just letting a few more people join. So, I've been having some problems with my live chat. So, I don't know if it's gonna stay on, but I'm hoping so. But yeah, we're gonna be reading. This is the book. If you have it, you can follow along. If you don't have it, you can just listen. But yeah, this is chapter 6. So we're gonna start at 6:23. So in 2 minutes. And yeah. So I've been having problems with the live chat because it keeps thinking I'm like under 12 years old, so it keeps turning it off. And I keep trying to turn it back on manually, and then it's like, no, we're gonna turn that back off. And I've tried like leaving my camera off, so I was fully expecting the chat to be off. So I'm actually very surprised. Yeah, I mean, if you want to give random updates that it's still on, that's fine, but I'm kind of expecting it to turn off pretty soon. Hi, Hannah. Hey. Yeah, I'm surprised my chat is on because the reason I didn't do it yesterday was because my chat would not stay on. And it's not that it needs to be on, but it was stressing me out. So, yeah. So, we're going to start in 1 minute. So, this is chapter 6. We're going to read chapters 6 through 8. Since it's such a short book, we're going to be reading 2 chapters a night. I mixed it up. Once we get to like Monster in the Hollows and Warden and the Wolf King, depending, we might start reading only 1 chapter because the chapters are crazy long, especially in the Warden and the Wolf King. But here, the chapters are only a few pages. So, okay. Hello. We are reading chapter 6 through 8 of the Warden and we're not reading the Warden and the Wolf King. Chapter 6 through 8 of On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. You guys probably be very confused if I started reading the Warden and the Wolf King. So, no, we were reading On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. And it's 6:23, so let's go. This is chapter 6, A Bard at Dunn's Green. Come on, Janner grumbled, relieved but annoyed at himself for panicking. Tink reached down to help Lily to her feet, but she ignored him and got up with the help of her crutch. Suddenly, the blast of a horn pealed through the summer air, and the crowd cheered. The games were beginning. All day long, games would be played on Dunn's Green, the wide lawn on the east side of town. Participants and spectators would stay there for most of the afternoon, watching sack races, handyball, zibsy, and Wiggle the chicken. Wiggle the chickens. Susan's horn. I get the reference. Everyone lay on quilts in the soft grass and watched the sports nibbling treats purchased in town, and that was exactly what Janner had in mind to do. If they could ever get there. Janner pulled Lily along by her free hand and urged Tink to keep up. Could you two walk any slower? Tink was far more interested in the delicious smells wafting from the kitchens and makeshift stands where merchants were selling baked butter dough pastries and fire-cooked swisher fins. I don't know what all these words. Hang on, I want a berry bun. Tink dug into his pocket with his hand. Janner wasn't tugging. Janner was losing his patience. I'll buy you a berry dumpling later if you want. Come on, he grumbled. Tink relented, and casting a long, regretful glance over his shoulder at a plump man in an apron basting a platter of buns with bright red jam. Yeah. Wait, no. He said, could you two walk any slower? He was talking to Cal and Lily. I think mainly Cal because he was falling behind. Tink relented, casting a long, regretful glance over his shoulder at a plump man in an apron basting a platter of buns with bright red jam. When they finally arrived at Dunn's Green, the Igby children sat on the lawn and watched the festivities all morning and into the hot afternoon. When the sun slipped westward and the shadows began to lengthen, the people chattered more and more. At dusk, the sea dragons would come, and the people would perch on the cliffs Why did I just lose my place? To watch them dance by the light of the moon, Janner could feel the anticipation in the air. To his delight, Tink had spotted a merchant selling blueberry gooey balls just behind them. He had spent the few coins Nia had given him, so Janner had begrudgingly shared some of his own just to quiet Tink's stomach and his mouth. Tink had no idea that his face was now smeared with dark purple. Lily was content to passively watch the games while she tickled Nugget's belly or threw a stick for him to fetch. The onlookers had tolerated this until she'd accidentally thrown the stick onto the playing field. When Nugget chased it, one of the handyball players, who was rolling awkwardly across the field, careful to not let his feet touch the grass, missed a pass from another player because Nugget got in the way. All eyes had turned angrily towards Lily, whose cheeks burned red as Tink's were purple. But when the onlookers saw Lily's crutch, they softened their glares and the games continued. Janner was glad that Lily was too busy scolding Nugget to notice the crowd's pity, or she would have been even more upset. Janner was excited about all the unfamiliar faces around him as he was about the games. He wondered where all these people had come from, though the attire gave some folks away. The Torborough citizens, for example, all dressed alike. The men wore little black hats, coats with long tails, in spite of the summer heat, and pants pulled up to a shocking height. The buckles of their belts sat just a little below their chins. The fashionable women wore frilly dresses with patterns that depicted the nose of various animals. Their black shoes were pointy and oversized, as if their toes were as long as feet themselves, which made the women lurch forward when they walked. To Janner, it was like watching circus clowns, which he'd only ever read about, desperately trying not to be funny. Most of them wore white gloves, so when a handyball player scored a goal, the sound of their applause was more like thopping than clapping, and they say things like, "Good show," or "Hello, mommy crack a whip," or "Boozy," or "Undeniably fine shot." The long-haired folk from Dogtown weren't so odd in their dress, but their manner was shocking. Men and women alike were loud, and their laughter sounded more like howling. Janner could tell that certain words they used were unacceptable to the Torborough folk standing nearby, but the Dugtowners were oblivious. They growled and guzzled and made such a jolly racket that it was hard not to like them in spite of themselves. Each stranger in Glipwood that day was a reminder to Janner that he had never left the town in all his 12 years. They lit up his imagination and filled him with an ache to see the world, but then he would hear Lily giggle or Tink burp, and remember again that for now he would have to watch after his sister and brother in this dreadfully quiet little town. Quiet, that is, except on the day the sea dragons came. He resolved to enjoy himself and pushed all unpleasant thoughts out of his mind. Suddenly, a commotion across the field interrupted Janner's thoughts in the handyball game. Onlookers near the opposite goal had turned around, trying to make room for something or someone. Excited whispers circulated through the multitude, but Janner couldn't make out what anyone was saying. Voices rose up from the crowds, and even the players were sweaty and covered with grass stains and dirt, though their feet were quite clean, stopped and focused on the fuss. Janner and Tink stood up to try to see what was the matter, but there was nothing to see but agitated spectators shuffling out of the way while someone pushed from behind them. The Fang sentries growled and hissed at their irritation at the disturbance. They were charged with keeping people under control, and something unusual was happening. As much as they hated the Screens, they weren't interested in doing any extra work on a hot day like this one. Then the rumor finally reached Janner's ears. A portly woman to his far right gasped and said breathlessly to her portly husband that Armelin the Bard had come unannounced and had been asked to sing by the Honorable Mayor Blagus of Glipwood. Tink and Janner looked at one another in disbelief. Armelin the Bard was there in Glipwood? Could it be that the very man who claimed to have visited the shining Isle of Anira? There's a note about it. Many Screens doubted that the legendary Isle of Anira existed at all. It is a sad truth that some people only believe something exists if they can see it with their own eyes. Bandy Impstead, for example, had argued for hours in Shaggy's tavern one evening that there was no such thing as wind for this very reason. His roof was torn off in a storm that very winter. Bandy's mind, however, remained unchanged. The same Armelin who wandered the captive lands and sang of the legends of Erwiar, of great deeds and great loves, was even now in Glipwood, in his regal garb upon his majestic horse. All thoughts of the handyball game vanished. The players were greatly relieved about this fact and stood up moaning and stretching. Two burly men rolled an empty wagon to the center of the playing field. Mayor Blagus mounted the makeshift platform. with a grunt, and it creaked beneath his weight. He had eaten a few too many sugar butter pastries in his day. He wore dark leggings and a bright red shirt. A gaudy fellow, yellow feather sprouted out of his hat, and he curled his mustache self-importantly. Blackus held his hands out to silence the audience, and then he turned to address the Fangs. Me too. I was like, oh, you're a little weird. He was a little weird. With all with our all-wise and stunningly handsome and powerful and swift soldier's permission, he said, bowing deeply so that his belly touched his knees, we would like to hear a song or two from the bard Armelin. We beseech your lordships this trite pleasure, for which we give you our eternal thanks and servitude. Speak for yourself, Tink muttered with a sideways glance at the Fangs, whose scaly smirks showed how much they were enjoying the mayor's groveling. One of the Fangs nodded and let out a slithery growl that polluted the air like smoke. We thank you, kind masters, Mayor Blackus cleared his throat. His tone changed abruptly to the regal inflated voice he used for many years before the Great War. My dear friends and neighbors, an honor rarely bestowed has risen us like the warm sun, he announced. Armelin the Bard, tail spinner of the imaginary shining isle of Anira, has chanced to join us in Glipwood on this fine day. He's accepted my invitation to perform for us. Please welcome this son of Scree to Glipwood by the sea. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Armelin the Bard. A bedraggled man stepped up to the wagon with a worn whistle harp under one arm. The smile on his leathery face reminded Janner of a mischief-minded little boy about to disobey. Armelin winked at the crowd and bellowed. Hello, dear Screans! Fangs are ugly! The applause ceased abruptly, and the four Fangs, standing at the edge of the crowd, roared a chilling roar and rushed, hissing towards the bard. Okay, am I late? Oh, you're not. You're not late. This we're reading chapter 6 through 8 of the first book in the Wing Feather Saga. So, Fangs are ugly. This is chapter 7, Barefoot and Beggarly. Janner felt a sheen of cold sweat break over him like a fever. It took him a moment to realize what he'd just heard. Had Armelin just insulted the Fangs? Amidst the wonders of his shock was a splash of surprise that the beggarly man on the platform was in fact the famous storyteller. Was there some mistake? Surely Armelin the Bard would at least be wearing shoes, he thought. And by the filthy, calloused look of the man's feet, Janner could see that he rode no horse, but walked wherever he went. If not for the weather-worn whistle harp in his hands and the deep waters of his eyes, Janner would have believed this man was an impostor. The Fangs pushed Glipfolk aside and bounded towards the wagon, drawing their swords as they ran. Janner's whole body tightened, and he tried to tear his eyes away from the moment when the Fangs reached Armelin. Many in the crowd emerged from their shock in time to scream. Real. But the bard merely stood on the wagon and smiled. As the Fangs neared, Armelin strummed his whistle harp and raised his voice in song. The Fangs faltered, jerked to a stop, and crouched before Armelin, trying in vain to cover their ears and wave their swords at him at the same time. Silence! One of them hissed. Armelin stopped singing and raised his eyebrows at them, as if annoyed about the interruption. Yes? Careful, bard, the Fang spat. It would be nothing for us to chop you into bits and gobble you in a broth. Armelin gazed at their sinister faces with that same reckless smile. I doubt you'd like the taste of me. I'm wiry and ill-fed. The only sound was the rattle of leaves in the wind. Will that be all? The bard said after a moment, lifting the whistle harp to play again. The Fangs stood frozen, but Janner thought he saw their black eyes shift sideways at the throng of people surrounding them on the green. Enjoy your petty songs, the lead Fang growled. He turned to the crowd. And we will enjoy killing you all the moment Nag the Nameless decides he is finished with you. May that day come quickly. The Fang's tongue flitted out between its long, narrow teeth, and his mouth curled upward in a grin. He clacked his teeth together and hissed at a little girl cowering at her parents' feet, as those surrounding her on the field looked down on the ground or closed their eyes. The Fang who had spoken spat on the grass and moved away, his three companions following with hisses of their own. Yeah, I did see Night. I thought I said hi, but my live kicks people out sometimes. Yeah, it's also on my part. I don't know why they do that sometimes. The silence was broken by the strum of the whistle harp. The whiskery man raised his voice again in song, and there was no longer any doubt in Janner's mind that he was indeed Armlin the Bard. The people sat enthralled as he sang the ballad of Laneric and Rube, and Janner and Tink found themselves pushing down tears as they listened to the tragic tale. After that, he sang another for the rapt audience, then another, until the sun sank westward and the light grew golden, lengthening the shadow across the dawn. As if the bard somehow knew, he ended his final song just moments before the sound of a low horn tore through the dusking air. Armelin smiled widely, and many listeners gasped with excitement. The dragons, Janner said, grabbing Tink by his shoulders. Tink smiled back at him with his sticky purple cheeks. Let's go, Tink said. We have to find a good seat. Come on, Lily, Janner yelled, turning to go. People in the crowd were pulling one another to their feet and surging back towards the town. Lily? Janner repeated, turning round when she didn't answer. But Lily was gone. Janner told himself to calm down. The same thing had happened earlier. She couldn't have gone far. She had just been sitting there on the lawn, rubbing Nugget's belly, hadn't she? Lily Iggaby! He called, turning in every direction. People were everywhere, jostling the boys as they moved past. Out of the way, boy, said an old man with a cane, holding his pants up to his chin as he pushed by. The Torboro women's wide dresses rustled past Janner and Tink, tugging them this way and that. Then a boisterous cluster of Ducktowners appeared like a wall before them. Janner found himself ducking under elbows and diving between legs, and twice he tripped over the Torboro's women's floppy, pointing shoes. Tink was nowhere to be seen, but Janner knew he was near because of the shouts of surprise and the cursing coming from his left. Janner worried that the Fangs might be drawn to this new commotion, but to his relief, the crowd finally thinned, and he saw that the Fangs were gone. That was almost fun, Tink said, brushing himself off. Janner spun around and grabbed Tink by his collar. There's nothing fun about this, Tink. Do you realize that she could be hurt? She could have been snatched up by a Fang or killed by one. We have to find her. Janner glared at his brother. Was Tink Was Tink really so foolish that he didn't realize how bad their situation was? As worried as he was for Lily, Janner was also thinking of his own skin. What would Poto do when he found out that Janner had failed in his duty? How would he live with himself if something actually happened to his sister? Tink flung Janner's hand from his shirt and backed away. He looked around Dunn's Green at the remaining people holding up their blankets and gathering their belongings for the walk to the cliffs. It finally sunk in for Tink that their situation was dire, and he put his hands to his mouth, turning in all directions to yell over and over again, Lily! Poto had taught them that if they were ever separated, they were to meet at the last place they had all been together. Surely Lily would be waiting for them innocently with Nugget in her lap, once the rest of the throng had cleared. She must be right around here, Tink. I know she was here with Nugget just a few minutes ago. Janner scanned the lawn with a hand on his forehead. Tink didn't answer. His eyebrows were scrunched together, and he was wringing his hands, calling her name with tremble in his voice. She'll be fine, you'll see, Janner said, trying to sound optimistic. Tink and Janner called for her until the crowd was nearly dispersed, but still she was nowhere to be seen. Janner asked the stragglers if they'd seen a little girl, but they answered only with irritated looks. They were far more concerned with sea dragons than these pesky little kids. Finally, Janner and Tink stood alone on the lawn in the fading light. Little Lily Iggaby was gone. The brothers looked at one another, unable to speak, unsure of what to do. Then a sound came faintly to their ears from the direction of the town, a sound that deepened their fear to terror and set them running as fast as they could run. A dog was barking, and someone, a little girl, Lily, was screaming. Chapter 8. Let's see how long Chapter 8 is. Oh, Chapter 8 is literally 2 pages. Chapter 8. 2 Throne Stones. Faster, Janner! Tink yelled over his shoulder as he sprinted towards town. Janner was huffing behind him, unable to keep up. As they passed the livery at the edge of town, Janner heard a deeper sound, below Lily's screams and Nugget's growls, the dreadful, unmistakable hiss and snarl of a Fang. Janner looked from one side of the street to the other, desperate for some clue to where the screams were coming from, but they seemed to be everywhere. Tink bolted down the main street, which was mostly deserted. The few adults who remained were hustling towards the cliffs, thinking only of the annual dance of the sea dragons. If they heard the screams and the growling at all, they showed no sign of it. Out of the corner of Tink's eye, down a narrow alleyway between I can never say her name right. Farinia's flower shop. I probably said that wrong. And Jaybird's barber shop. He saw Fang struggling with something. Tink skidded to a stop and Jenner plowed into him, nearly knocking him down. There in the alley, in a cloud of dust, Nugget was darting back and forth between the Fang's legs, evading the Fang's furious efforts to stab him with a spear. Lily screamed again, and without a second thought, her brothers ran down the alley to save her, though they both knew there was nothing two young boys could do. Oh, my ring? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Why am I... With Lily screamed again, and without a second thought, her brothers ran down the alley to save her, though they both knew there was nothing two young boys could do, pitted against a Fang of Dang. The narrow alley led around a corner to a small area between the back of Farinia and her stables. Lily was curled into a ball, while a second Fang held her into place with the butt of his spear. One Fang watched with grim delight as the other struggled with the little black dog. Nugget was in a frenzy, pouncing in and out, snarling and snapping at the Fang. The Fang standing over Lily was chuckling in a thin, papery voice. "What's the matter, Slarb? Is this smelly little thing too much for you?" Slarb growled as he jabbed again at Nugget. The spear nicked Nugget in the leg, and he yelped. Lily screamed, and the Fang jabbed at her with the butt of his spear, just as her brothers burst around the corner, Tink in the lead. Lily saw them and began kicking at the Fang with renewed vigor. Janner found himself on Slarb's back, beating him with all his might around the neck and shoulders. It was the first time he had ever touched a Fang, and he was dimly surprised how cold the scaly skin was. Tink dove past the second Fang, grabbed Lily's arm, and tried to pull her away from it. Slarb, with Janner on his back, hissed and thrashed his long pointy fangs, dripping with venom that burned at the touch. Nugget bit the lizard's leg and wouldn't let go. The other Fang seized Tink by his shirt collar and yanked him backward into the ground, where he lay choking and clutching his throat. Lily reached for her crutch, but the Fang snatched it away from her and crushed it into splinters. She saw bits of wood etched with purple flowers flying through the air. You slithering bully. The Fang then strode over to Slarb and kicked Nugget hard in the belly, sending him flying through the air with a yelp. The little dog crashed into the wooden wall and landed in a motionless heap. Slarb hurled Janner over his shoulder and onto the ground. He bent over Janner's neck with his scaly jaw wide open, baring his dripping fangs to bite. The second Fang drew his sword and raised it to strike Tink. Lily was helpless, but too close. Lily was helpless, but to close her eyes and pray. At that moment, there was a dull thunk. Slarb's black eyes rolled back and he fell unconscious on top of Janner. The second Fang had time to see that Slarb had been hit in the head with a fist-sized rock before he felt a stone smash into his own temple. He tottered for a moment, then crumpled to the dirt. Tink lay there stunned. "Where did those rocks come from?" he asked between gasps for air. Lily's hands were folded tight and her eyes were still shut. She opened one of her eyes, amazed that the three of them were still alive. They heard Janner's muffled voice from beneath the Fang, and Tink snapped out of his daze. After a few heaves, he pushed Slarb off, and Janner scrambled away with a moan, wiping his neck where the Fang's burning venom had dripped on it. Janner rushed over to Lily and helped her up, inspecting her carefully. "Are you hurt?" Lily trembled but shook her head, pushing her hair from her face. She hugged her brothers and smiled through stubborn tears. "Nugget!" she cried, and hobbled over to the little black heap. One of the Fangs groaned and stirred. "We should get out of here," Janner said. "We don't want to be here when these things wake up." Lily was crying, stroking Nugget's face. "Lily, we have to go," Janner urged, pulling her away from the dog. Suddenly, Nugget yelped and leapt to his feet. Hackles raised, he bared his teeth and circled menacingly, but his fierceness melted when he saw Lily, and he set to licking her face and wagging his tail as if nothing had ever happened. Lily struggled to her feet, pointing at her ruined crutch. I won't be going anywhere with that." "Here," Janner said, sidling up beside her and pulling one of her arms around his neck. "It looks like you're going to have to let us help you for once." "Let's go," he said, and they hurried out of the alleyway, leaving it completely empty. Except, of course, for the two Fangs lying in the dirt, and the two stones that knocked them unconscious, and the mysterious figure on the roof of Jaybird's barber shop watching the three Igabys flee. The end. Okay, so I love that chapter, but if you notice, in the show, that is a lot, like the scene where all of that's happening is very much different from the books, just because, again, like I was kind of saying this in one of my videos, they have to make it more G-rated. So, they didn't show a lot of the things that were listed in the books just because it's pretty violent. But yeah, it's way quicker definitely in the books. Basically all that happens is he's like holding Lily, and then they throw something at Slarb, and Slarb gets hit by rocks. But in reality, the person who throws the stones is very important. So in the show, no, in the show, I'm not spoiling who it is, but in the show, the person who throws the stones doesn't throw the stones, which which is important. So it's kind of like in the show, they just threw something at the wall and it laid on top of him. So it's definitely a little bit difficult for them to get it over there. I really wish that the Wing Feather Saga would have been made. Animation is fine, but would have been made for a little bit older kids, just so that we could, see more of the authenticity of the books, which is why I like the books more than the show, as much as I like the show. But reading these is just, the action in the books is peak. Like, it's honestly so good. But yeah, I'll stay on live until I have to go eat dinner. But so probably a few more minutes. Anyways, so I'm just like, I love that chapter. And the person who threw the stones is very important. So I think when we overlook that, it's a little bit like, we shouldn't do that. Yeah, the books are so good. And someone actually unsubscribed to me because I said I started criticizing the show when I was like, I love the show, but they need to add these things. So they were like, oh, you're going too far. I'm unsubscribing. So I was like, oh, okay. Yes, it is. But we don't find that out until later. Anyways, so yeah, I think I'm always going to be open about it though, because I think it's just, I don't know. I love these books so much. And so, as I love the show, I think a lot of people misinterpret when I say that I like the books better. They're just more authentic to me. The action in the books is better. I'm sorry, but it is. Like that one scene where the one scene in the book where Slarb is pushing Jenner's head into the ground and like dripping venom on his neck. That is literally so cool. Like, anyways, also, yeah, one thing I have to say, anybody can unsubscribe to me at any point in time, anytime you want, but you don't need to like advertise it, because once you start saying I'm unsubscribing to you, then it feels like it's more for attention. If you really don't want to stay on my channel, that's totally fine. And no one's holding you captive here. Like, I'm not holding you captive. You can unsubscribe, but you don't need to say it. Like, just unsubscribe. But anyways, we are actually getting pretty far in the books. I really wished I could have done it yesterday, but my live was not working. I tried like 4 times. But yeah, so I'm glad my chat has been working right now. So yeah. The next chapter we'll read chapters 9 through, right. 9 through, let's see. I want to see how long. 9 through 11. So that is the sea dragon part. So I love that. Yeah. But if you are new here, like new to listening to this, we're thank you. Yeah, but we're just starting to read the series. I was doing it because a lot of people love the show, but they were telling me, they're like, Veronica, I really want to read the books, but I don't have access to them. If you don't know where to get the books, you can get them at any library near you. But a lot of people, I mean, I own the hardback, I own the set, which is why I'm able to do this, because I own the box set. But a lot of people don't have it. So I think it's harder for people to, once they finish a book, go to the library, get another book, go to the library. So I think it's just easier for me to just do it on live, because it's the same as reading it. Like, this counts. Like, listening to the live counts as reading it, because you're listening to it. It's like listening to an audiobook. So I think I like talking about the chapter. I think my favorite part in this chapter is when Janner gets mad at Tink, because we don't get this. And like, one thing I don't like how they adapted it from the show, is that they have it at the library. Yeah. One thing that I don't like that it was adapted to the show is that they made Janner, he's so much more mild. He doesn't get mad at Tink hardly at all. The one time he got mad at Tink was, he was like, Tink, what, you can't just walk away. And in this, he grabs Tink by his shirt and he's like, are you crazy? Lily's in danger. And it kind of snaps him into that. And it might seem like, why do you want Janner to be mad at Cal? Well, I because that's part of their both of their character development, and we see afterwards, Kalmar's like, whoa, you're right, and he starts calling for Lily, and he's stressed out. That is what led them to be able to find Lily in the first place. So yeah, not in like a super mad way, but Janner's his older brother. He's his throne warden, so he needs to be getting mad, you know? And I think I really am hoping that they start incorporating that more. Because I heard in season 3 they left out the line where Janner's like, just keep your claws to yourself. I was like, and they made Lily say something. They made Lily make a joke about Kalmar and make a joke about him being a dog. Lily, that doesn't sit right with me. No, 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 no. Because Lily would never say that because again, like I'm once we start reading the rest of the books, you'll see like the way Lily acts towards Cal is special. And it's not it is in Lily is incredibly protective when it comes to Kalmar. And when people I don't and it doesn't right with me that Lily would make a joke about her being a about him being a dog. Lily is if you read the books, once we start getting after everything, I'm not trying to spoil it. I don't know. Okay, I'm about to make a big spoiler. So anyway, so after he gets fanged, then Lily is literally like protective mode goes up like this much. So anybody gives her brother a dirty look, she's like, literally try me because I'm not letting you talk to my brother like that. When Gregory Bunge called him a dog, Lily was like, you can't call my brother a dog. And now Lily's making a joke about him being like a dog. Um, I don't think so. I mean, even Janner wouldn't go that far as to tell Kalmar he's acting like a dog, let alone Lily. Like, yes. Okay. Shut the door. I'm coming. Shut the door. Okay, guys. I have to go eat dinner, but I'm obviously gonna be making more content. My CapCut is acting really annoying lately, but I'm trying to figure that out. Anyways, I'm gonna be making more edits and content, but I will be doing a live tomorrow, hopefully at 5:30ish, to read what chapters did I say we were reading? Chapters 9 through 11. Okay. Bye. If you guys want more videos of me talking about how I don't like talking about the differences in the show and the book, let me know. But I do like the show, don't get me wrong, okay?